today. Today's episode, we're going to discuss how Milwaukee Succeeds is doing that. They're doing some innovative things in the city of Milwaukee. And and we have a guest here, Mr. Vincent P. Lyles. But before I introduce you to this phenomenal brother, I just want to give a little history on Milwaukee. Milwaukee is not different than many major cities in the United States. You know, it's had a complex and troubled history, racial history. But there are a couple of things that I want to point out, and Vince can correct me or add to it. But we talk about the Great Migration, just like many cities in northern part of the United States. There was this great migration of African Americans earlier in last century in housing discrimination. But there's something in schools that I'd like to read. Milwaukee was one of the last cities in the United States to implement a desegregation plan for its public schools. The city school district was ordered to integrate in 1970, but resistance from white residents and school officials led to a decade of court battles and limited progress. We won't get into police brutality, but we will talk about racial segregation. Despite the progress in recent decades, Milwaukee remains one of the most racially segregated cities in the United States. Now I'm going to stop there because honestly, that's really not any different than Chicago or St. Louis or some of the other factors. But what I do think is unique about Milwaukee is what they're doing on the educational side. And this is where I want to introduce you to Mr. Vincent P. Lyles, a phenomenal brother. And we have history because we went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison together, and I've just seen his ascent. And let me just introduce you to him. Vince has an undergrad and a law degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And in doing my research, he also has a certificate from Harvard University as well. Vince he's had a number of very high profile jobs, being the vice president of public finance. He was the president of MIA Community Development Corporation, where he actually did some M&A work and sold a company. He was the president of the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Milwaukee for 7 years. He was the assistant vice president for Advocate most recently, and now he is the executive director of Milwaukee Succeeds. Welcome, Mr. Vincent P. Lyles. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to see you, Keith.
Yeah, it is.
It's a pleasure. We've been friends for a long time, and I was thinking about this in terms of preparation for today's podcast and thinking about it's been close to 40 years.
Yeah, it has. You put my age out there, man. That's quite all right.
And proud of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk.
We know that haven't made it this far. So.
Yes, very, very true. So let's talk about that. So when you left Wisconsin, I can tell us how you navigated to where you are today. Yeah. Was it passion? Was it planned? Tell the listening audience a little bit about who you are and your brilliance.
Yeah, well, I don't know about brilliant, but certainly there was some passion and there was a purpose for me in terms of my ascension to where I am today, right? I had gone to Wisconsin not knowing all of the things that a University of Wisconsin offered. And one of the things that I knew I had an interest in, small at the time, was politics. And, you all may recall back in 1983, our good friend and fellow Chicagoan Jesse Jackson decided to
Yes, I remember that.
And I was a little student organizer on campus for Jesse Jackson's campaign.
I remember that.
And so, and then I applied to law school and I went to law school with the very purpose of becoming a politician. All the people that I admired in politics were lawyers to some extent. And so that's why I went. I left Madison in 1987 and practiced law for about 3 years in the district attorney's office as a prosecutor. Thinking about, my political career and all those kind of things. And then went to go work for the former mayor of Milwaukee, John Norquist, was a classmate of mine in law school.
Okay.
He got elected in 88. And I went to go work with him in 1990. And I was there with John for about 5 years. And couple different roles. The last one being I was the election commissioner for the city of Milwaukee. So I got to
Wow.
see all the stuff behind the scenes. But what I also got to see was that's probably not exactly what I wanted for my career and my life. I met my beautiful wife in 1989, and she said to me one time, Keith, she said, if I never have to go to another rubber chicken dinner in my life, I'll be just fine. You're just not going to go down that political path without a partner. So,
Okay.
Fortunately for me, I was friends with some guys who were working at Robert Bayer. And those guys invited me to apply for a role there in the public finance group. And I was there for 11 years doing municipal finance deals all across the state of Wisconsin. We were the financial advisor in Detroit as well. So I traveled to Detroit a little bit.
Okay.
And, but, this work was really, really intense, new and different. And it really taught me a lot about myself because you put a lot of windshield time in, driving all over and meeting different people and essentially selling yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, I was able to do that successfully. And I was at the 1995 NAACP convention. And there was a brother there from M&I Bank who he and I played basketball against one another coming up. And he said to me, he said, we're expanding, we're growing. You should think about coming over to the bank. And I went over and led the CDC, and we did a lot of good work in St. Louis and Minneapolis and Wisconsin and Phoenix. Again, great opportunity, leadership, building opportunities, but also doing some good, right? Because the bank essentially used the CDC, Community Development Corporation, as a tax shelter. So,
okay.
They buy the state government or federal government would award tax credits, right? Those tax credits had value, right? The tax holder didn't have to pay any interest on those earnings for a period of time. He or she would then use that capital to lend to developers out in the community doing affordable housing, doing senior housing with special needs. And that work was really interesting to me. And I got the real estate bug to some extent and dabbled a little bit in real estate back then on a personal level.
Okay.
But, interesting, in 2010, M&I was sold to BMO Harris Bank.
Gotcha.
So the bank that everybody knows today. And, there was a guy who was running the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Milwaukee. And he became the national president of B&G. And he was a friend. And I reached out to him and said, hey, man, you going to Atlanta? I got cousins down there. I can hook you up. Blah, blah. He said, you should really think about this job. I said, what do you mean? I said, I wasn't a club kid. I don't know B&G.
Okay.
He said, but they were looking for a business executive. They were looking for somebody who, knew the Milwaukee community.
Right,
and,
right.
You should give it a shot. And so, you go to the first interview. First interview to me is always like the first date, right? You talk about yourself. Everybody should generally pass that.
Right.
And so I passed that and got invited to the second round and called the recruiter up, Keith, the night before and said, I'm not coming to the second interview.
You did?
And she said, what are you talking about? What do you mean?
Okay.
You wouldn't have made it this far. I said, yeah, I don't know. It's a big job. I'm not sure I'm ready for it. He said, you're ready. You can do this. And, 2 or 3 interviews after that, they hired me to run arguably the largest Boys and Girls Club in the country, right? We
Wow.
5,000 kids a day. We had 50 locations. We were serving kids from 5 to 18. And, I feel really proud about the work that we were able to do there. And I was there almost 8 years. And matter of fact, I went last week. We had the 10th anniversary of an event I started there called College Signing Day.
Okay. Huge.
I stole that idea from ESPN.
Okay.
Spring, they have the signing day where the big linemen say, I'm going to Illinois, I'm going to Wisconsin.
Right.
I did the exact same things with our kids, right? But we'd also combine that with a year or a couple of years of training for those young people, right?
Okay.
Help them write their essays, help them visit schools. We did all this stuff. And at the end of each year, we would essentially garner about $10 to $15 million in scholarship support for these young people in school.
Wow.
You know, this, like I said, last week was the 10th anniversary. And as of last week, there were more than 1,000 kids who had come through the Boys and Girls Club and now had gone off to, you know, college in various places, not just Wisconsin, but all over the country.
Wow.
And some of them were going to tech school. Some of them were actually going to military. You know, we had a couple of kids who said, I want this, but I'm not ready. I'm gonna go off to the service. That's fine. You go.
Okay.
And you know, after being at B&G, and it's a grind, right? Because we had a $30 million budget, and most of my job was external affairs. I'm out shaking hands, kissing babies all day. That's what the job was.
Right.
So much so, Keith, I don't know if you remember the Pfister Hotel in downtown Milwaukee, kind of our signature old line.
I do.
Historic hotel, right?
I do.
I was in there so often. In the restaurant, I actually had a nameplate, right, that they put out.
I knew you were somebody.
Hey, that's where I was meeting donors, man. I was trying to, you know, make it happen. And, you know, and that job took a toll. And so I was ready to do something different, a little bit more quiet and sedate, and ended up going to Advocate of Rural Health and, you know, VP of their community affairs. And again, external affairs, that kind of thing. That's kind of my forte. That's
still a big job. Because you know,
a big job. Absolutely. Both Chicago and Wisconsin, right? So
okay.
And when COVID hit, you know, obviously the travel.
So let me just, sorry to interrupt, just for the listening public, Advocate of Rural happens to be one of the largest healthcare systems in the nation.
Yes.
And so go ahead, Vince.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, when I came on, they were 12th in the country. Now they merged with a company in Charlotte, North Carolina called Atrium Health, and now they're the 5th largest. So when I was there, we were 70,000, and now they're 150,000 employees.
Wow.
So yeah, big job. And you know, to be honest, I left there, you know, for a couple of reasons. One of them was that the healthcare space I didn't think was a really good fit for me. You know, I just didn't. You know, you got to find those jobs that get you up every morning. Right? Yeah, whatever the job is, you got to find that job. That wasn't necessarily happening. And then secondly, this opportunity with Milwaukee Succeeds. You know, we talked about Jesse a little while ago. Danae Davis had this job before me. Danae and I have been friends since the Jesse Jackson campaign. She was working for the governor of Wisconsin at the time, and I'm a little student organizer.
Okay.
And she and others in the Madison area were, you know, encouraging and supporting me. And, you know, they were trying to help out. And so when she announced she was leaving in the fall, you know, I wished her well, didn't think much more about it other than say, I'll be at your retirement party.
Okay.
They went through a process and they didn't find exactly who they were looking for. And again, the same recruiter who worked with me at Boys and Girls Club was recruiter for this job.
Okay.
So she reached out and said, hey, you should think about this job. This is right up your alley. And, you know, lo and behold, I started here January 23rd. And again, it's right up my alley because it combines some of my public-private relationships that I have.
Yes.
Created over the years. Certainly touches my passion around kids, particularly Black and brown kids.
Yes.
And then it adds a purpose. Our purpose, you know, quite frankly, is very simple and straightforward. We are trying to boost up the early childhood education sector in Milwaukee.
Got it.
It's a dysfunctional sector, and it's unfortunately isn't like a traditional industry, right? It's a little bit more of a emerging business. Even though it's been around for a long time, it's got, you know, there are 1,500 early childhood centers in Milwaukee County, for example.
Wow, 1,500.
1,500. Right?
Wow.
Most of them are very small, you know, operations with 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 kids. They have some big facilities like Boys and Girls Club was a big early childhood provider, but most of them are pretty small. So you're trying to lift up these small businesses, you know, and like you in your advisory business, right? We're trying to advise them, trying to help them.
Oh, I get it now. Okay.
We advocate for them. So we have a policy arm. So we've got a big bill in front of the legislature now to try and get more dollars around the early childhood space across the state of Wisconsin. We also are trying to get more people of color in this business. If you think about who is the workforce in this business, primarily women, and about 90% of them are women of color, right?
Okay.
We're trying to build up the skills of the ones we have, but we're trying to get more in, right? Whether they are somebody who's expressed an interest in teaching in the past, or there's somebody who's completely new to us. We've got some partnerships and pilots that we've helped fund or helped launch that are trying to train people.
Gotcha.
Early childhood educators. But we also are looking at this from a standpoint of how can we, for lack of a better term, change some of the institutional or system related issues related to childcare in Wisconsin. And I'll give you an example.
Yes, please do. Please do.
Right now, there is a quality rating system that exists, 1 through 5.
Now, what does that mean?
So quality rating, and so essentially the state of Wisconsin comes in and assesses those 1,500 centers that I talked about.
Gotcha.
In order for them to get state funds, they have to be a part of this quality rating system.
Gotcha.
Most of the facilities are in that 2 to 3 range, right?
Gotcha.
The highest you can get.
Gotcha.
When I talk about trying to do some systems change, if you look at the criteria for 5, a lot of it centers around what I would call higher post-secondary education levels, right? Are you a master's level teacher standing in front of a 2-year-old?
Gotcha.
And while on the surface that might sound good to the outside world, you and I both know, and your listeners know, that you don't have to be a master's level teacher to
be effective
and to be effective.
Yeah.
Right? You really need to be able to equate your love, care, support, encouragement for that child and the others in that group so that they have confidence when they go to school, so that they can spell their name, so that they can, wipe their nose. They can do all these things, right? And you're reinforcing what the parents are trying to do. You're supporting the parents. And so a big part of what we're looking at once this lobby season is over is how do we go back into that quality system? Because it's been in place since 2011. So, it's been plenty of time to test.
Isn't that when Milwaukee Succeeds started? Was 2011?
Yes, exactly. Okay. So we started as part of a national network called StriveTogether, which is based in Cincinnati. And there are a network of about 70 organizations similar to mine all across the country. In Chicago, it's called Chicago Strive. And in Memphis is Memphis something, and Baltimore is Baltimore Promise, and so on and so forth. And all of them have some level of focus around cradle-to-career.
Gotcha.
So think about from birth to whatever that young person is trying to do. And most of it centers around focusing on people with lived experiences.
Yeah.
Right? So that's our key audience. Instead of us trying to think about what T. Terry and Vince Lyles have to say, and we certainly have our own share of lived experiences.
Yes.
You and I both know that there are people in our communities who have a unique lived experience. And we, as providers of services to them, need to listen to what they're saying.
Wow. Okay.
I use the analogy all the time with this work in terms of how Amazon functions, right? Because people are amazed at Amazon's ability to deliver things. People have been delivering packages in this country for 250 years. The Pony Express and all those things, they delivered packages, right? That's not new.
Right.
What Amazon did was they decided they want to focus on the customer. So Keith said, I need this package by 10 o'clock. So Amazon says, I'm going to get it to you by 9:45. As a matter of fact, you can track my truck as it's coming to your house, right? You can take a picture and I'll send you the picture. I'll do all those things because the customer is what I am trying to.
Got it. And so that's what you guys are doing. You're focused, you're revolutionizing this. Okay.
Yeah. So we have a couple of coalitions that center around our early childhood work. We also focus on high school success, where we're trying to increase the success level of Black and brown males in Milwaukee. And again, listen to them for lived experiences. What would it take at your school, young man, for it to be a better place where you think more of your friends would come? What do we need to do in this school to make it an environment that is welcoming and supportive and encouraging? And oftentimes kids have some really good ideas, but we generally as adults, we know what's best.
Well, you know what's interesting, Vince, as I was doing my research and I started looking at the educational performance in Milwaukee, you're right. The Black and brown males had a very low graduation rate. And so I guess my question to you I applaud what you guys are doing. It sounds like it's unique in your city. How do you guys how are you going to test the effectiveness of the programs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that we look at is we spend a lot of time with the data, right? We want to have a baseline.
Yep.
And if that baseline suggests X, our goal is to try and get X plus, and then X double X or double plus, right? And sometimes that is in the area of access to quality childcare. So for example, if there are 1,500, right? How many of them are 2 stars? How many of them? Because oftentimes, parents don't know. The tool was designed, the rating system was designed to kind of help parents as consumers. But you need somebody to interpret what that information really is saying. And that's a role that we play as kind of the honest broker, right? We don't have a vested interest in terms of where you send your kid, right? But we're trying to lift all the boats. Is the work that we're trying to do. We're also trying to make sure that those folks, those lived experience, have a seat at the table. So on our governance leadership table, we have people with lived experiences. So again, it's not just Vincent Lyles coming up with these ideas. We actually bring in folks to the table. And then the other thing that I think we do, pretty well is it's around coalition building, right? We can't do this by ourselves.
No, you can't. It's too complex.
Yeah, and we're not direct service providers. So I don't have 500 kids coming to, my office like I did at B&G.
Right.
I have to work through others. And working through others, you find out other people's strengths and their weaknesses and some of those things that they're trying to learn and try and do. So, for example, we are helping to facilitate some funding for some of our other providers out here who are providing those direct services. So there's a group in Milwaukee called 4C, and they are kind of the training ground.
Gotcha.
For all
I saw that on your website.
Providers, yep. And so we help them facilitate a grant with Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance, who's been a funder of ours since 2011, right? We are trying to work with, some of the other, groups in town to make sure that they are even aware of those opportunities. They understand what some of this work is. And quite frankly, Keith, we're also trying to look at this, particularly when we talk about our young people, is how do we build capacity of our young leaders, right? Because we need people to take our places, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And be comfortable with the idea they may not do it like we do,
yeah,
but they need to know some of the mechanics about running a campaign. They need to know some of the mechanics about how you get a job at an Abbott lab. They need to know some of the intricacies of fundraising, right? Because fundraising is both an art and a science.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
And just because you have a noble cause, there's still some science related to how you get those dollars out of Keith Terry's pocket.
Right. So just a question, because, being the former CEO of the Boys and Girls Club, I would assume a direct service organization.
Yep.
What are some of the frustrations, and maybe that's not the best word, that you see influencing people to be better than they are? Because let's face it, I'm sure you have seen a pre-COVID impact looking at the data and a post-COVID impact. So how do you guys improve the lion's share? I know you want to raise all boats, but there's some poor performers.
Yeah, there's some poor performers, but you got to meet people where they are, right? I mean, not every kid wants to go to college, right? And we should be okay with that as a society, right? But one of the things that I do know is that if I want to get better attendance at a high school, for example, it's much better coming from one of their peers than it is from some old 62-year-old guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Who enjoyed high school. I loved high school, right?
Right.
That's the best time of my life.
Right.
But I was an athlete. I was a pretty good student. blah, 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 blah. I know for some kids, high school is not the place. So we're trying to work and build up I'll call the heft of some of our young people as leaders to try and encourage others to come to school. I'm also trying to talk with some of our community leaders. We just designed a youth-led assessment.
Got it.
In all agencies to say, if you serve youth, please do our assessment and we'll do a data analysis around the assessment. And again, it's not to say that you're doing anything wrong, but the assessment questions are based on our interviews of hundreds of youth who said, we want these things to happen at your agency. And again, not
I see.
But we want these things to happen. This would bring more people to your agency. These would be more opportunities for us to engage with you. And you know, we did a little bit of that when I was at B&G, for example, because B&G, you know, we do real well in that space 5 to 12. You know, because kids don't have a lot of control over their life from 5 to 12.
Yeah, you're right about that.
But we weren't serving teenagers all that effectively until we started doing some of this, you know, work around the high school, putting clubs in the high schools, go where the customers are, right? We started this college access program, right? And again, said, you know, little Keith, we love for you to you know, go to college if that's your dream, but you got to come here every Tuesday and Thursday to get that medicine.
Gotcha.
And so we did some things like that, and we're trying to do similar things with Milwaukee Succeeds, but we're also, you know, thinking to ourselves, we got to scale this up.
Okay.
Right? Milwaukee is still, you know, number one in too many of the bad categories. So I'm looking at, as my next strategic initiative here is to try and scale up some of this work. We have 40 people in our coalition today. We got 31, you know, parent ambassadors, right, working on our behalf. Well, and I said to my team yesterday, we had a staff meeting, I said, we got to, you know, we need to double this up. We need to look at out in 2025 and say, that's a measurement of our success, that we now have twice as many people who are engaged.
I see what you're saying.
They will be the ones who will convince their neighbors, their friends, their family to get involved.
So are you being supported by the political landscape there? I mean, I hate to bring in politics, but it's important because I would assume your funding sources are donations and grants.
Absolutely. We are certainly supported. Matter of fact, we partnered with the city of Milwaukee, for example, around their ARPA dollars. So they got $40 million of ARPA dollars. We originally put forth a proposal that was around $13 to $15 million of support of those ARPA dollars around early childhood education.
Okay.
First time that ever been done in history of Milwaukee. Right?
Are you serious?
And
wow.
For us, the Common Council president was a new father, right? So he had a personal interest in this, and he had some other support on the Common Council. And the idea was what could we do? So we put together a couple different ideas. One of them was getting stipends for the employees, right? Right now, the average salary for early childhood care workers is about $13 an hour, right? Wow. You're not going to be able to keep anybody around,
right?
$13 an hour when there's demand that there is today, right?
Yeah,
you can work a quick trip and make $25 an hour pouring slushies. So, right. You know, the fact that you have to do something that's, you know, right. Really intense. So, you know, those stipends are a total of $1,500 that the center can pay to its employees. We've allocated those dollars so they come in tranches. So it's a $500 tranche, $500 tranche. But before the year's out, we will have doled out more than $1 million of stipends to just the workers, right? These are dollars going strictly to people who are paid, who are doing the work of caring for our babies, right? The other thing we did with the city of Milwaukee was this initiative around getting more Black and brown males. So there's a literacy lab, which is a national entity that has been working on this issue for a while out of Washington, D.C. And so what was started here in Milwaukee was a mini version of that. And they have a cohort of 10 young men this season. They'll have 20 young men next season who are all focused on early childhood education. These are all guys who graduated from high school, Some
Mm-hmm.
of them have a little bit of college or tech degree, but they've expressed an interest in becoming an early childhood educator.
So how can the listening public help you there? Because I education is a passion of mine. I was on the school board in the city that I used to live in, and that's Evanston, Illinois. And now that we have Zoom, which we're on right now, is this something that people can, other males from across the nation can raise their hand and participate, or do you have to be on site?
Yeah, you need to be on site for what we're trying to do. But again, Literacy Lab, and I can send you the link to those guys out of DC. They are a national group, right, of trying to do this. And there's another group called, oh my God, I want to say Distinguished Gentlemen or Gentlemen of Prominence or something like that. But they just had a national conference in Charlotte, North Carolina, about 3 or 4 months ago, where again, it's all African-American male early childhood educators coming together, right? Because we see the gap, we see the need, we see the opportunity. And you think about what your young man or young woman's mindset is. And again, in the early childhood space, the earlier the better that we get to them. But if we can share with them that there are some African-American men and Latino men who care about who they are, what they are, and how they become successful early in the process, it's going to go a long way in terms of making a difference for them when they get to their K-12 system. If you think about, because in K-12, the national data is that only about 15% of the teachers in public school are people of color. 15%.
Say that again.
So only about 15% of all the teachers in public schools in America are people of color. Wow.
Is that true in Milwaukee?
That's absolutely true in Milwaukee, right? And one of the quick side stories. So my wife and I are at the mall. This is several years ago when I was at the Boys and Girls Club, and there was a woman who's working the counter, and there's a woman a customer in front of us, and the customer in front of us had a winter jacket on, and the woman behind the counter said, "Oh, I love your jacket. I work at so-and-so school, and I'd like to get a jacket like that for recess." And the woman told her where he got it. My wife steps up and says, "Eddie Bauer has some jackets that are really nice too." And I lean in and I say, "Hey, I heard you say you work at so-and-so school." And I said, "I know that school." I said, "I'm with the Boys and Girls Club." She said, "Are you the security guard?" So I'm holding my wife back now because he's ready to jump over the counter.
Right.
But I called the principal up the next day and I said, "When's the next time you guys have your in-service?" Right. And so I come over and I bring them donuts, right? Thanking them for being a Boys and Girls Club site. And the woman sees me and she goes, right? Because the principal introduces me because she knows who I am, right?
Right.
And I went back to the woman and I said to her, I said, "Look, I'm not here to call you out in front of your colleagues, right? That's not my purpose here today. But I'm here to remind you that you stand in front of 30 Black and brown kids every single day.
Excellent.
And all you do is think they can be a security guard. You're in the wrong job."
Excellent. That's a hell of a story.
And she said, "Oh, I didn't mean anything." I said, it's not a point of whether you meant it or you didn't mean it. That's not the point. I said, I want you to think about the fact that security guards are first thing that came to your head, first thing that came to your mind, right? And if
you're tearing down barriers, man. I mean, it's the subliminalisms that exist out here. It's the law of the lid. If I can't suggest, and kids are impressionable. They're very impressionable, and they need strong leadership, and we need strong males to show back up. And so I applaud you. We have 10 minutes left, and so let me ask a couple of more questions. So in terms of, let me just say this for the listening audience. If you have a question, please put it in the chat or the question, and we'll try to get to it in the last remaining minutes. But so are you at the table with the school board or the mayor? Because you're pivotal. You're pivotal because what I know now post-COVID is that attendance and the interest in education seems to have gone down. and going on to higher education seems to have gone down, and people are interested in more innovative ways of making a living. You know, my mother always stressed that I should go to school to get a good education, to get a good job, and that's the proper thing to do, right? Kudos for me for listening. But when I fast forward post COVID, the country seems to be in a very different place. And so my question to you is, since you guys are focused on the data, real-time lived experiences, are you hearing the same kind of thing? Are you seeing something different? I threw a lot at you, so I'll let you kind of run with that.
Yeah, no, Keith, we are at the table, particularly with both the school district and the mayor's office. Matter of fact, we were with the mayor this morning. Here in Milwaukee, we're holding a early childhood educators convening of some of our StriveTogether partners. So there are about 25 representatives from the 12 different partnerships that are in Milwaukee, and the mayor kicked us off this morning, right? So yes, the mayor is definitely at the table, and the superintendent of schools is at our table, right? We work with the public school system, but we're also working with the other schools. You talked about in your opening about some of the challenges, and I'll call it even dysfunction that exists in a school setting in Milwaukee, where you got the charter kids, you got the choice kids, you got the voucher kids, you got the public school kids. I mean, it's a whole, Thanksgiving basket of options for people.
Can you explain that?
Need to be better.
Can you explain that? Because in my research, especially the listening audience, I didn't know that Milwaukee's voucher system was as large as it is, that if you get a voucher, you can pretty much go to any school that you want to in the city.
Absolutely. Wisconsin was the very first state in the country that started the voucher program. As a matter of fact, the legislator, who was Jesse Jackson's state representative or state contact, was the author of that legislation. And she did it all around poor kids, and specifically Black kids. That's how we started the voucher program. And it's been taken over by many, 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 many others. And to your point, right, you literally today can take that voucher and you can make as much as $100,000 a year and take your voucher and go to whatever, almost any kind of school you want to go to. And quite frankly, the state will pay for you to do that. As a matter of fact, there is legislation now pending around getting even more support for the voucher schools. Right now, there's a gap between what the state pays for the public school kids and the voucher school kids, about a $4,000 or $5,000 gap. The voucher folks are fighting now to get that gap closed, right? And again, I don't begrudge them for doing it, because the reality, Keith, is that on Monday, little Vincent went to the public school.
Yep.
On Friday, his mama had to move, and so now he goes to the charter school or the voucher school.
Gotcha.
He's the same kid, so he needs the same level of resources just because he's across the street, right? So that part I'm good with, but what I'm concerned about is that we have to, if we really want to change the way education is delivered in this country, we really do have to focus on the customer, which is the child, right? I talked about Amazon earlier. Amazon's success is because they focus on the customer. We want to teach the way we've always been taught, right? Yeah. If you go back and think about how education delivered in this country, it's no different than what Aristotle did way back in Greece, right?
Right.
He stood in this room and listen and hoped somebody was listening, right? The kid today, when that 8th grader walks into high school these days, he's much more smarter than his teacher.
Yeah.
And when he goes to college, he knows a lot more than his professor knows because of technology, right? So why do we think we're going to teach them the same way that we've always taught them? A good friend of mine, Keith, talked about our alma mater, and he was so disappointed. He said, Vincent, my son told me he only went to class 20% of the time when he was at UW, right? How can that happen? Wisconsin's a top whatever's a school. I said, Richard, you have to appreciate, again, your kid was smart enough to get in because that's part of the formula.
Oh, yeah.
They don't let you in unless you're bound to graduate, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Secondly, he might have went to the most important 20% of the time.
I see your point.
Right? That other 80%, they just trying to stretch the semester out so you can justify paying all that money, right? he may have gone to the most 20 because he graduated. So he obviously knew what to do. And a big part of how we've got to think about education differently, Keith, is we have to think about how do we deliver this in a different manner. Some of it's going to be virtual. Yeah. Some of it's going to be with more teachers of color in the room. Some of it's going to be different books. I'll never forget, one of my friends was a former principal at one of the school districts here in Milwaukee. And he said, he's trying to get, his Black boys to learn how to read. And
I see your point.
They're giving them all these books to read, Elizabeth Barrett Browning and all this different. Ain't nobody reading that. Right. He says, I started passing out books about LeBron and Kobe and brother. He said, because my goal was to get them to read. That's all I wanted them to do.
Right. I see your point. Well, what's interesting is the work you guys are doing is important. And I think your organization's unique in that, in reading the website, and I want to bring it up so that our listening public can see it, and is that this is their website. And I absolutely love the mission statement that we see here, and hopefully folks can see it. And let me enlarge that. Success for every child in every school, cradle to careers. What a phenomenal statement that is. Yeah. And so for you folks that are listening, Vince, how can people help? How can I help? The website is www.milwaukeesucceeds.org. So go visit them, look at what they're doing. It's phenomenal. There's some data there. And I just think that you guys will get a lot out of it. Mm-hmm. And so we have 2 minutes. Is there any final comments that you'd like to make?
Well, the thing that I really love about my team and Milwaukee Success is that, first of all, these people are extremely dedicated. They are people who understand the value of data. They understand the value of illuminating the gaps that exist and focusing on the gaps. Instead of trying to boil the ocean, focus on the gaps, and the fact that they are doing this work through the eyes of people with lived experiences. I think that's the difference maker for us. And as we think about how we want to propel ourselves into the future, we just want to be an organization that is seen as, for lack of a better term, kind of that honest broker that bridges people together and helps people achieve success, and every child to achieve success, cradle to career. So thank you very much for having me. Great to see you, my friend. And as you always say, make it happen.
That's right. And one more thing, I absolutely remember that Jesse Jackson event that you pulled together, speaking from the stage, and I was like very impressed. I remember that. I mean, seriously, I do remember that. But I wanted to close this out, and I just want to thank everybody for listening to this. This is the second episode of the podcast, The Next Big Thing, Innovators on the Cutting Edge. And today's episode is how organizations can help those in need while doing good business. You just heard from Mr. Vincent P. Lyles, all of the good work that they're doing at Milwaukee Succeeds. Our next podcast will be talking to the CEO of Data Nexum, another phenomenal story, brother who had an idea, who brought it all the way to fruition, and they're doing phenomenally well. But today, I applaud Vincent and what they're doing at Milwaukee Succeeds. Please follow them at www.milwaukeesucceeds.org. And I'd also ask that you follow me, Keith D. Terry. I have a company called Terry Performance Group. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Please follow me at www.terryperformancegroup.com. Follow me on LinkedIn. This is a passion of mine, telling excellent stories and putting together so that folks, businesses can operate at the highest level, because financial independence, living the life that you can dream of, is at the heart of my mission, my passion. And with that, I would just want to thank you all for joining in. And I bid you a great day. Go out and enjoy the summer, because here in the Chicagoland area, it's 75 degrees with no clouds. Enjoy. So thank you, Vince.
Thank you, Keith. Great to see you, my friend.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening to The Next Big Thing. I'm your host, Keith D. Terry. If you've enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support this podcast, please share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and a review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on my YouTube channel at Keith D. Terry. If you want to recommend a guest, please email me at info@terryperformancegroup.com. This has been produced by your host and Jade Productions.